Unless you've been living under a rock, well, you've heard that the indie horror Obsession just crossed $200 million on a reported budget of $750,000. Now, that might seem like a lottery win, but it is not a fluke. There is something to be learned from every failure and every success. And this is a success that smart writers and filmmakers will not ignore. So if you're a writer or filmmaker, the smart move is to stop and ask, what is this movie doing right at the script level? I'm Neil Chase, author of Iron Dogs, writer-director of a thriller feature, Spin the Wheel and Contamination. And today I want to break down the biggest screenwriting lessons from Obsession. This is exactly the kind of low-budget, high-impact genre film writers should be studying right now. It's proof that you do not need a giant budget, a massive scale, or big stars to make something hit hard with an audience. What you do need is control, clarity, character, and a strong understanding of how to make an audience tune in. So let's get into what Obsession gets right, and what your own scripts can learn from it. But first, click like and subscribe if this video speaks to you, and then grab your popcorn. Let's get started. Okay, Obsession was written, directed, and edited by Curry Barker, who first built an audience through YouTube and then broke out with the micro-budget found footage horror film Milk and Cereal. Obsession, made for under $1 million, premiered at TIFF in 2025, finished as the first runner-up for the Midnight Madness People's Choice Award, and then was acquired by Focus Features for a reported $14 million. And it's also been reported that, based on this success, Barker has already wrapped Anything But Ghosts for Blumhouse Focus and is attached to a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre reimagining for A24. Now, I've personally had conversations with people over the last week who say things like, yeah, this is no big deal, or it happens all the time, or it's just the way the system works. Nothing to see. No, it isn't, because none of this happened by accident. When you look at it from a writing perspective, Barker makes some very smart choices here. So let's start with the first lesson. Keep the premise simple. One of the smartest things Obsession does is start with a premise that is incredibly easy to understand. A shy guy can't bring himself to tell the girl that he loves how he feels. So he uses this wish-granting object to make her love him back. That's it. It's simple, it's clean, it's immediate. And as anyone who's familiar with wishes in movies knows, it's loaded with danger. Apparently, Barker was drawn to the concept precisely because it felt simple and familiar, but still unexplored in the specific direction he wanted to take it. See, the movie updates the old monkey paws idea, specifically a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode where Bart uses the monkey's paw. But think about all the other Wish Gone Wrong movies to draw from. You've got Wishmaster, Bedazzled, Aladdin, about a dozen movies featuring leprechauns. And then there are even non-magical movies like Fatal Attraction or Play Misty for Me, and all of them are built around this idea that getting what you ask for is not the same as getting what you actually want. And that's a great lesson for writers. Just because it's familiar and simple doesn't mean that it's weak. In fact, in genre storytelling, a simple premise is often a strength, because the simpler the setup, the faster the audience understands. They understand what the character wants, what the danger is, and what could go wrong. That gives you room to spend your time where it actually matters, in the execution. Now, this is something a lot of writers get backwards. They think originality means complexity. So they pile on mythology and rules and subplots and layers of explanation, when what they really need is a fairly clean concept with strong consequences. Obsession doesn't do that. It says, here's your wish, here's the flaw, here's how it goes wrong. And then it squeezes both the characters and the audience. That's smart. So the lesson here is, don't be afraid of a premise people can understand in one sentence. If anything, that's where the real challenge begins, because then you have the foundation to build on top of the familiar and make it unique to you. Next, subvert expectations in the right way. Obsession starts playing with audience expectations pretty much from the opening scene. Bear's awkward love confession plays like one thing at first, but then quickly reveals itself to be something else entirely. This tells the audience, this movie is not gonna play it straight with every beat. And then to build on that, the film creates tension through limited perspective, mainly giving you Bear's perspective at any given time. So, see, subversion works best when it comes from character and perspective and not just plot twists. If the audience only sees what Bear sees, then we are trapped inside his bad decisions, his delusions, his panic, and his blind spots. That matters a lot in horror. Writers talk a lot about subverting tropes, but usually they mean try to be clever. Well, that's not enough. Good subversion doesn't just surprise the audience, it also creates uncertainty, which is gold when it comes to genre, especially horror. Let the audience think they know where they are, then make them uneasy once they're there. The next big lesson from Obsession is a simple one, but it's one a lot of writers still overlook. Know your characters. And I mean, really know them. Their backgrounds, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears, their flaws, hopes, dreams, and the relationships to the people around them, both shown and not shown in the story. That's how characters start feeling like real people instead of placeholders. A lot of writers focus so hard on plot that they don't spend enough time thinking about the people who are supposed to be driving it. They know what needs to happen next, but not necessarily who this person is when life is not forcing them into the scene. And that's how you end up with flat or interchangeable characters. People who feel like they could be, well, really swapped out for any generic hero, heroine, best friend, or love interest without really changing the story in any way. Obsession does a strong job of defining these characters and understanding who they were as people before throwing them into this fantastical, escalating nightmare. Bear works because he doesn't just feel like the shy guy in a horror movie. No, he feels like a very specific person with a very specific emotional weakness and patterns. Same goes for Nikki and Ian and Sarah. Even in a contained film with a relatively small cast, you get the sense that these people have lives, histories, and dynamics that existed before the story started. And that's the goal. When the writer truly knows the characters, everything gets better. The dialogue gets sharper, the choices feel more honest, the conflict feels more personal. And then the plot starts growing out of personality instead of just forcing people from beat to beat. See, I learned this firsthand when writing my novel Iron Dogs, which first started out as a screenplay. In order to really understand my characters, their mindset, their motivations, I had to figure out as much about them as I could. And I did that at the screenplay level before I ever wrote a single page of the novel. The script gives almost no background to any of my characters, much like in Obsession. They are defined by the choices and actions they make in the present. But the only way to make those choices and actions feel purposeful and character specific is to do the groundwork on figuring out who these people are before you put them on the page. And if you know your characters deeply enough, that shows up in every single scene, even if you never explain all of it out loud. Then the surprises come from real people in real situations and not just from plot mechanics. And speaking of getting to know your characters, did you know that I have a free character development workbook available to you at no charge and made for this exact reason? And if you're a writer or producer working on an original genre script and you want help with it on any level, well, check out my screenplay coverage and coaching calls for personalized one-on-one help. No AI, 100% me. Links for all of these are in the description below. Okay, now let's get back to the next big lesson. Size doesn't matter. Obsession keeps its locations tight and its cast small and relatively unknown. See, it's not drawing us in with any kind of big set pieces and huge star power. Now, in a horror, that can actually work against you. So instead, most of the dramatic action happens across a small handful of locations and within a pretty contained social circle. Now, yes, that's obviously a production advantage. Fewer locations and people means lower costs. But if we look at it through strictly a story lens, it also means higher tension. See, containment creates pressure. Think about it. A larger story world gives you scale, gives you room to breathe. A tighter one closes you off to the point of suffocation. In Obsession, it helps the story feel more invasive and uncomfortable. It doesn't have that relief valve of going wide all the time. So it keeps circling Bear and Nikki and the consequences of this one awful decision. Writers sometimes think bigger automatically means more cinematic. Not true. A contained script can feel incredibly cinematic if the relationships are strong, if the pressure is constantly building, and if the locations are being used well. So the lesson here isn't write small because it's cheaper. Rather, write small when containment serves your story. Next, write to your story's pace. What do I mean? Well, write to the pace that your story demands, and not the pace that you assume all movies are supposed to have. A lot of writers hear broad rules like keep it moving, get in late, get out early, cut the fat, and 1 page equals 1 minute. Yes, those things can be useful in the right context, but pacing is not one size fits all. Different genres have different pacing demands. And even within those genres, different subgenres move differently. What do I mean? Well, like a potboiler psychological thriller will build tension slowly. See, the action might be minimal for long stretches because the tension is emotional. It's social, it's psychological. An action horror, on the other hand, well, that often moves faster once it gets going. The pace tightens, the scenes get shorter, the danger escalates quickly, and the movie starts functioning more like this thrill ride. Now, neither approach is better. They're just doing different jobs. That's the key. You have to know what kind of experience your story is supposed to create. You can meet the audience where they are. Then you can surprise them. Give them the slow burn they came for and then turn that screw harder than they expected. Or you can give them the thrill ride they wanted and then suddenly stop cold for one quiet, horrifying beat that lands even harder because of everything else that's been around it. Obsession does this well. Always asking the question, is the pace serving the story? When it is, well, the audience can't help but lean in. Next, build plot out of the character's flaw. To me, one of the strongest screenwriting lessons in Obsession is not just the hook, but rather the way that the plot grows directly out of Bear's fatal flaw. See, it's not that he's unlucky or this random guy the horror just happens to. He's not just standing in the path of a curse. No, he's an active part of the problem. He's insecure, afraid to tell Nikki how he honestly feels. He's put her on this pedestal, and he wants the reward of intimacy without taking the emotional risk that intimacy requires. That's the story. If Bear had found even a little courage at the beginning and simply told Nikki how he felt, well, the movie would be completely different. Win or lose, they'd go on about their lives and would even have a shot at real happiness. But he doesn't. He gives into the flaw. He takes a shortcut, reaching for magic instead of honesty. He chooses control instead of vulnerability. And that's what kicks the story into motion. See, the plot isn't arbitrary. It's not some random thing happening to random people. It grows out of character. And what makes it even better is that Bear's arc is a negative one. He does start to glimpse the difference between what he wants and what he actually needs. He gets what he thinks he wants, and that should force him into a reckoning. But because this is a tragedy, he doesn't rise above his fatal flaw. Instead, he keeps feeding it. That makes the movie stronger. And it teaches us that in some genres, like horror, not every arc should be redemptive. Sometimes the most powerful arc is watching a character get repeat chances to face themselves and then fail. That is painful. But it's also very human and dramatically rich. So the lesson here is don't just give your character a flaw, build your story out of it. And finally, the writer's voice is key. Now, like I said before, there have been a lot of stories about wishes gone wrong. The Monkey's Paw, Wishmaster, Bedazzled, Needful Things, Fatal Attraction, Play Misty for Me, The King of Comedy, 1 Hour Photo. The list goes on and on. Different movies, different genres, different mechanisms. But a lot of them are exploring some version of the same truth. Wanting the wrong thing can destroy you. And if that central concept is already crowded, well, then how do you stand out? Voice. Not just that of your characters and their dialogue and actions, but your voice as a writer. See, the stronger your voice is, the more clearly the page communicates your intent, tone, style, and point of view. Barker followed Hemingway's advice. Write what you know. As a 20-something-year-old, he wrote 20-something-year-old characters that feel real and lived, likely drawing on his own experiences and those of his friends. So when you write, lean into what you know. And if you don't, then research the crap out of it. And if you can, talk to those who have lived it. Authenticity comes out through voice. And in a saturated market, originality rarely comes out only from the concept. Rather, it comes from answering the question, can you make this feel like it could only have come from you? That's how you stand out. So here's my takeaway. When genre is done well, it can teach you a huge amount about structure, character, tension, tone, and audience interaction. Obsession's box office proves Barker was onto something when he wrote it. And for me, it's that sometimes sticking to storytelling basics and keeping things simple is how you cut through that clutter and give the audience a satisfying ride that meets their expectations and then exceeds it. At least, those are my 2 cents. What are yours? What's your favorite Wish Gone Wrong movie, and how does it stack up against Obsession? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, please share it with someone you think might enjoy it too. And until next time, stay creative.